Joining us now to review some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is the Rice News analyst, Emmanuel Efeni. Good morning, Emmanuel.
Good morning, Ruben.
Good morning.
We are so distant from ourselves these days.
Yes.
That is what this period calls for. I saw you earlier in the day from such a distance, like what it used to be, but
don't worry.
We just have to do the needful.
This too shall pass, as they say.
Yes. Let's start with these day newspapers. The lead story, COVID-19. Federal government gets tougher, moves to deploy military to curb spread. Nigeria records first deaths as cases rise to 40. Spread to Edo State. Government directs total closure of land borders, suspend Federal Executive Council meeting, Council of State meeting, recalls retired doctors, nurses, urges Lagos. Abuja residents to stay at home. Presidency asks lawmakers to submit to medical checks. Chief Justice of Nigeria shuts courts nationwide. Yes, institutions, government institutions, that is, are being closed down as a result of this. But what many wonder, how far can this go? Because the rest of the society is still going about their normal business. Buses are still moving around in Lagos. People are still crowded in buses. So when Lagos civil servants stay at home, levels 1 to 12, stay at home, and other Lagosians are still choked, packed in the markets, Okeani, Anjorin market, and what have you. Are we really controlling movements or observing this social distance in its entirety?
No, we're certainly not, quite frankly. It's like building higher walls and leaving your gates wide open.
Well, but I would like to see a situation whereby, you know, also here in Nigeria, maybe we'll have public sanitation, you know, fumigating streets, trying to go to the markets to enforce, you know, hygiene in many of these markets.
They've done that in Ogun State.
Okay, but I mean across the country.
That yeah,
because oftentimes when we talk about these interventions, we just talk about Lagos State, Ogun State, Ekiti State, and then the Federal Capital Territory.
Yeah, where you already have cases.
Yes.
Now Edo has also joined with one case.
But other states, you know, should not wait. They should take proactive measures. Now, there's talk about recalling retired doctors and nurses. Well, I imagine that those retired doctors and nurses would be required as volunteers. It should not be by compulsion. And the point we need to make is altruism is very important at this time. People who can help in one way or the other should volunteer and help. And I hope these retired doctors and nurses are not the same retired doctors and nurses whose pensions are not paid regularly. You know, because this is part of the lessons that we should be learning. Because when you abandon people, you don't treat them well, the state forgets them once they are out of work, out of service. Then when there is a crisis, you now remember them.
Yeah.
But let's hope that there will be enough altruistic persons among them.
Are you imagining that we are not likely to get a response from these retired doctors and nurses?
No, I'm not saying we will not get response. That's why I'm saying they should volunteer. But, I mean, you know the situation in Nigeria, because they are pensioners. Have they been getting their pensions now that their country says it needs them? And third, I mean, so far, I don't know whether, you know, I don't have the right information. It's only Dangote Foundation that have had making a contribution to this. Where are the other rich people? Where are the big corporates? When are they going to also come forward to support government efforts? All of a sudden, you know, there's so much silence in that area. Jack Ma took Jack Ma, you know, to donate face masks and other, you know, facilities to help the world. I've not had our billionaires. I've not had them, you know, saying anything. We only heard from Dangote.
Yes, it's for me as well. The only information I have now that it's only been Dangote, which is actually amoral at this point.
Well, maybe because they've not heard from the highest authority in the land also. Because there has to be some kind of mobilization. from the highest level of government.
Oh,
What kind of mobilization
for me, those
do
are
you
separate
want?
issues. There's no excuse for either, as far as I'm concerned, for the silence from the highest levels, as you're calling it, and also
Silence begets silence.
No, there's no excuse. You don't need the president's permission to do what's right.
But there has to be an attempt to mobilize people also.
Nobody mobilized Alhaji Aliko Dangote before he made that pledge.
I take your point, but that's not an excuse. Don't give anybody any excuses.
See, in America, the president literally called on the private sector. He mobilized heads of major pharmaceutical and health-related corporations. They were all standing behind him, giving assurances, making pledges. Who is mobilizing our own millionaires and our own corporate titans?
Nobody.
Somebody has to do it.
No, I take your point. Somebody should do it, but they don't have to do it. Everybody should know what they ought to do at this point. This is
philanthropy is not what everybody ought to do. If you have the heart of philanthropy, if you don't have it, you can be convinced to do it. Convince them to do it. Convince them that you have need for more money. You have not made that point.
Yes, there's that.
Yes.
But adults, should you as an adult be convinced and compelled to do what you want to do?
No, not compelled. Convinced. Have you heard from the government that we need so much money, we don't have enough money? Is it the problem that we don't have enough money?
So there's a need for the government to say
yes,
that? Wow.
To mobilize people.
Wow.
That, look, we need more donations, we're in dire straits, money for this, money for that. What is the need of government? We've not heard anything.
Okay, I think we've made the point, and they've had you know, so if government needs support, you want government to say so. Yes.
Ask for support. The 1 billion, you talk about 1 billion for this. How has it been deployed? Is it enough? Is it going around? Is that billion sitting somewhere in an account generating interest? These are things we need to ask.
It better not be.
So, government should do its part. Are we doing enough? That is the question. Guardian newspaper. Now, government plans troop deployment as Aisha Buhari urges total shutdown. Aisha Buhari seems to be in the fore, giving good example on how to self-isolate.
Work from home. She shut down her office.
Which was a very good example to everybody. Now she's urging shutdown, total shutdown. But if we are not hearing from other persons in government, then we'll have a
total shutdown. Already the federal government has asked its workers to work from home. I hope they will be able to leverage on technology if that is available within the government system. The Nigerian stock market, the stock exchange is shutting down today, you know, and opting for remote trading, as the New York Stock Exchange did yesterday. But for the stock market, of course, the stock markets all over the world are already heavily computerized, and investors are not likely to be affected. They can work from home. But I also like to see a situation whereby, you know, corporates also ask their staff to work from home so that the office space can be decongested. Yesterday, I was calling on the banks, but I think that at least one bank, Union Bank, has taken the step of saying that, you know, most of its workers can now work from home. Only those who can provide essential services would go to work. So, I mean, I would like to see more companies, you know, ask people to work from home.
Yes, and take very...
Unfortunately, you and I cannot work from home.
No. Yes, take concrete steps to ensure that you have proper social distancing, because that is part of the problem. I was watching this big pharmaceutical company in Ibadan yesterday, and they usually have this large crowd because it's close to UCH. But what they did is to draw boxes, so to separate their customers. So you must be in one of those boxes to be attended to. They take particular number in at a time, attend to them, they go out. Other persons will go into those boxes with enough distance. Because if you don't do that, usually people who are not unruly, they will crowd themselves and compromise what we're trying to achieve.
Did the government tell them to do that?
No, no. But they did the needful, and I'm sure other...
As we always do. We don't wait for the government around here.
What I've observed is that in many supermarkets, in many places now, restaurants, I mean, you are not allowed to come in until your temperature is taken, you know, and then you are compulsorily asked to use a sanitizer.
Yes.
At the supermarket I went to yesterday, we had to queue up. They were allowing us in, you know, batches. In batches of 10s, you know, so as not to have a crowd inside the supermarket. But the experience I had, the man with 3 trolleys of toilet paper,
so
I had to ask him.
We'll take a short break now. We'll be back with more from today's newspapers. Please stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Still with us in the studio, reviewing headlines from today's newspapers from around the world, is Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efeni. Emmanuel Efeni.
Ruben, let's go to the Nation newspaper. Looking at the numbers in Nigeria, it's becoming a bit scary. The rate at which it goes up every day. Nigeria nears lockdown as COVID-19 spreads. That's the Nation newspaper. Now look at the numbers. Confirmed cases, 40. Yesterday it was 36. Today is 40. Lagos, 28. FCT, 7. Ogun, 2. Edo, 1. Ekiti, 1. Oyo, 1. 28 victims came in from abroad. 8 contacts of confirmed cases. And, of course, 2 treated and discharged. That should be some good news. Then 1 dead, 1 in critical conditions, 32 clinically stable. I think there should be some ray of hope from those who have recovered, those who are stable, that indeed the system is able to cater and take care of those who have been affected once they are taken into quarantine and treatment administered. Although which treatment they're administering, we don't know yet. Then the chloroquine treatment refused to go away because yesterday again, President Trump reconfirmed, as it were. And the governor of New York is saying, please send us the dosage you have now. Because it's like you take chloroquine, you'll be injured. You don't take, you die. So
there have also been reports of chloroquine poisoning, particularly here in Nigeria.
It's toxic.
But I think, you know, reacting to the front page of the Nation and the statistics given graphically on that front page, you see that yesterday, so far, Nigeria had its highest number of cases in one day, 10. Now, out of these, 40 that we now have, what we also understand is that most of the persons are persons who had traveled abroad or who came into Nigeria from abroad. So for that reason, it would seem to make sense that, all international airports have been shut down and land borders are also being shut down. But if the numbers continue to rise, can we handle this situation?
That's the issue.
In Lagos, where we already have 28 cases as reported, what we understand is that Lagos State government has a facility of 50 beds, a 50-bed facility. What happens in case the number of cases in Lagos, exceed 58? And what we know is that, there's just that major infectious diseases hospital in Yaba, the mainland part of Lagos. Now, I think government should begin to think ahead, not just in Lagos, but also in the FCT, to begin to prepare for a likely explosion. I mean, it may not happen, but if there's going to be a likely explosion, then you have to have more intensive care units. You have to begin to think of buildings that you can possibly convert, because we may not have the capacity to be able to build a hospital within a matter of days, as the Chinese did. I think this should become part of the strategy, for the commander of COVID-19 containment measures in Lagos. That is the governor himself, and also for the Nigeria Center for Disease Control and others who are involved, because now we are still at the stage of containment.
Yes.
We could wake up tomorrow and we're at the level of explosion.
This is the issue. Other countries are converting malls, hotels, all kinds of measures have been taken because there's simply no space.
Yes.
What are we going to do?
We just have to be prepared.
Yes, the
and
argument has
ahead.
never been that they cannot treat people. The argument is what happens if the system becomes overwhelmed.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Daily Sun. Yes, coronavirus, total lockdown begins. Not yet total lockdown. Closure of all borders is not total lockdown. Maybe that's a misuse of terminology there. But beside the masthead of Daily Sun, Governor Bala Mohammed in self-isolation over contact with Atiku's son. Ex-VP clears air on son's case. Now, those big men or big wigs or VIPs who think don't shake hands does not concern them. This should remind everyone that this social distance is for real. It's to help all of us, whether you are a VIP, you are a big man, or you are a political bigwig.
I mean, it's awful.
So the governor has to go into self-isolation because...
And his aides.
And his aides.
It's awful.
He met and shook hands. And
it's not just enough to go into self-isolation. They should also get tested.
Yes, I think that will go.
Yeah, they're going to get tested.
That's going to take place wider in isolation.
Yes.
And if they prove negative, good for them. But if otherwise, they'll be taken into quarantine, whether you're a governor or not. You'll be taken into quarantine.
Why are you saying it as if...
Yes. No, because, you know, when we say there's no big man in this matter,
yes,
this is the reality. And we are seeing it. So all should be one, and let's obey simple rules this time, irrespective of our status. The Daily Trust, COVID-19 pandemic, Nigeria heads for total lockdown. Federal workers to work from home. Things may get worse. Federal government. What is the federal government doing if things get worse? That's what we want to be hearing right now. Edo, Ebonyi, Kaduna, Niger, Kogi introduced work from home. Bauchi governor on self-isolation. Well, there are, if we look at other topics, yes, let's go to the Punch newspaper. Yes, the lead story, obviously the same. Contacts, we may be heading the way of China, Italy, federal government warns. Cases rise to 40, government orders complete border closure. Other stories above the masthead. ASU declares indefinite strike over IPPIS Borscht Pact. Now, we saw this coming, what they called warning strike. There was nothing like warning strike. They started a strike 2 weeks ago, and without notifying, giving the appropriate notification.
Well, in any case, this is a good time to go on strike. They won't be missed because the universities are already on lockdown anyway. But we
have to look at the issues.
One point about the federal government saying it would call out the police and soldiers to help with contact tracing. I mean, usually we complain about soldiers being used for civilian work. But the country faces an emergency, and it may be necessary, you know, to just mobilize all hands. But in the future, we would like to see a situation whereby the Nigerian military provides leadership at critical moments of emergency. Look, in some of the countries, you know, I think even in China, even the military is involved in the search for vaccine. You know, you have military establishments in other countries that are very strong on research and development activities. Yeah. I don't think that the Nigerian military has that kind of a capacity. So as part of the lessons we're learning from all of this, you know, we really need to deepen some of our institutions. You've had countries where doctors go on strike. You know, the country will call out military doctors to rescue the situation.
The military in any country have a lot of capacity.
Okay.
Whether it is in engineering, they can construct a bridge in a very short time. And I remember
the Nigerian military,
yes,
they have
that capacity. When a bridge collapsed in one federal university, whether in Niger State or thereabout, it was the military that was called in to reconstruct a new bridge in a short time. The Nigerian Army Corps of Engineering, I think they have their headquarters somewhere close to Auchi. They can do a lot. We have military scientists who have discovered medical instruments in the past. But the military, they have a commander-in-chief.
Well, Efeni, maybe you hold on. We have a breaking story. Nigeria's president, Muhammadu Buhari, has tested negative for the COVID-19 virus following a test for the disease that was carried out yesterday on the president by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. Arise News can report. The NCDC has informed the president on the outcome of his negative result this morning in Abuja, bringing relief and excitement to the presidential villa. According to presidential sources, the test for the president was necessitated after his chief of staff, Mr. Abba Kyari, tested positive for COVID-19 on Monday. Kyari had traveled to Germany on Saturday, March the 7th, to meet with officials of Siemens in Munich on the Nigerian electricity expansion program. He returned exactly 1 week later on Saturday, March 14, but did not show any symptoms. He was said to have been at a meeting on containing the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria all through Sunday, where he reportedly started to cough. Subsequently, he voluntarily submitted himself for testing and was informed of his status yesterday. He has, of last night, gone into isolation and treatment. We'll be staying with this story as more details unfold. Well, that's leadership there. The president submitting himself for test, the chief of staff also going into isolation. This is the kind of leadership,
a responsible thing to do.
That a lot of people have been asking for. And it's good to see again that the point is reiterated that COVID-19 or coronavirus is no respecter of persons or space.
And nobody wants to be the cautionary tale, but the more stories like this come out, the more people will understand this myth that seems to have really taken hold that black people are immune. For God's sake, we're not.
Yes, you see, this at the level of the presidency. Recall some legislators came back from trip outside the country, refused to self-isolate, and were even trying to take their seats in the National Assembly.
Awful.
Act of irresponsibility.
Awful, awful behavior.
But, well, it's a good example, but Nigerians still need to hear from the president. I think...
No, we have to.
Yes, what has just transpired with this development, Ruben, also underscores the need for the president to come out and take charge of this situation.
He has to.
There's no other way. We cannot just... all we hear from the president is whether the daughter has gone into self-isolation or he has been tested.
No.
When other world leaders
are
literally taking charge,
yes,
they no longer sleep.
Emmanuel Efeni, let's take a short commercial break. When we return, the review of headlines will continue. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Still with us in the studio is Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efeni, still reviewing headlines of some of the newspapers from around the world today. But again, we take the breaking news again. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has tested negative for the COVID-19 virus, following a test for the disease that was carried out yesterday on the president by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. Arise News can now report. The NCDC has informed the president on the outcome of his negative result this morning in Abuja, bringing relief and excitement to the presidential villa. According to presidential sources, the test for the president was necessitated after his chief of staff, Mr. Abba Kyari, tested positive for COVID-19 on Monday. Kyari had traveled to Germany on Saturday, March 7, to meet with officials of Siemens in Munich on the Nigerian electricity expansion program. He returned exactly 1 week later on Saturday, March 14, but did not show any symptoms. He was said to have been at a meeting on containing the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria all through Sunday, where he reportedly started to cough. Subsequently, he voluntarily submitted himself for testing and was informed of his status yesterday. He has, as of last night, gone into isolation and for treatment. We'll be staying with the story as more details unfold. Efeni? Well,
we'll say a good one, that the president is very much available to do his duty, because if it were otherwise, it would have been taken out of circulation, at least for a while. But now that we know that he's still very much available, I remember you once said that, I hope somebody's not going to tell us that the president is on self-isolation.
Yeah, I did.
So the president is not on self-isolation. There's no need to quarantine the
beyond
president.
this, you know, I mean, the presidential villa is the seat of our democracy,
Yes.
if we may say so. You know, even if the people themselves are the main substance of democracy. I hope that, you know, the managers of the presidential villa will have already by now put in place measures for social distancing, and particularly, you know, around the office of the president. And that other persons who may have had, you know, contact or direct access to the chief of staff will also submit themselves for testing. But the important thing, of course, is for a system to be in place to, you know, ensure social distancing. And maybe for a period, maybe the president's schedule, you know, should also become lighter, and access to him should be further restricted.
But what is important now is the #1 item on his schedule, the president, yes, I mean, is addressing the nation. As you said, is his duty. Yes. Failure to do so is a dereliction of that duty. He must, quite frankly.
But one thing we must also take from this story is a case of officials not complying.
Yes.
Because if Abba Kyari had gone into self-isolation after returning from Germany, then we will not be talking of trying to
That's a good point.
Yes.
That's a good point. He went to a meeting. Yeah.
He ought to have gone into self-isolation, having returned from a country that is affected. But he did not. That's why he went to a meeting until he started coughing, and of course,
spreading droplets all over the place.
So perhaps everybody in that meeting will also need to be checked. I hope they've taken all the... So it is a lesson that officials, no matter how high-ranking, if you are coming back from a country with a COVID infection, then you must first go into self-isolation for 14 days. So Abba Kyari did not do it, Atiku's son did not do it, and
hundreds of other people have not done it. Because you know, everybody thinks this virus happens to somebody else, not to them. Ridiculous.
Well, maybe we'll just try and just touch one other subject on Nigeria, or let's just go to the foreign newspapers. Yes, in the UK, lockdown is the word. The Guardian UK, Prime Minister, stay at home. This is a national emergency. And of course, Johnson drastically restricts movement to combat coronavirus. Gatherings of more than 2 people in public to be prohibited. Police giving powers to disperse groups and enforce lockdown. Yes, yesterday in an address. But let's just look at how other British newspapers are reporting the story. The Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph, the end of freedom, the Daily Telegraph. Why the Daily Mail simply puts it this way: lockdown Britain. Astonishing restriction of daily life, only 1 exercise outing a day allowed. Don't see friends or family. Fines if you don't obey, or for at least 3 weeks. That's the lockdown that is coming in the UK, and that will be enforced. Then if we go to South Africa, the Star newspaper. The Star newspaper, yes, there's also a lockdown in South Africa. It will start from Thursday, total lockdown. 21-day curfew set to begin on midnight Thursday until April 16. Troops to be deployed on the streets. President calls for a halt to panic buying. Yes, President calls for a halt to panic buying. So in South Africa, a lockdown is on its way also. That will take effect from Thursday, of course, all in a bid to contain the spread of the virus. But an event took place. This is where people disobey. You see why I don't want to go into total lockdown. There's a story there. Dance festival, 200 fear exposed. Yes, there's this festival that took place, the Afro-Latin Festival, and so one of the persons from that festival tested positive. And the fear is that over 200 persons who attended that festival are likely to be positive, and they're also mixing with people.
Why didn't they just postpone it?
You know, sometimes people try to claim their rights and freedom.
Oh, dear.
Well, I think we may also get to a point in Nigeria when there will be a total lockdown.
I think so.
The way we're going. We just hope that the numbers will not continue to escalate. But clearly in the United Kingdom, I mean, government is putting its feet down to contain the spread of the virus. I mean, the United Kingdom now has close to almost 500, cases.
Yeah.
And the numbers just kept increasing.
But I hope it's not too late.
Well,
why did they wait to 500 cases before total lockdown?
I hope not. But also here in Nigeria, people are already engaging in panic buying. And I've also observed that some of these supermarkets are taking advantage and they're increasing prices. So perhaps there is also a role here for the Consumer Protection Agency of Nigeria to make sure that people do not engage in sharp practices. But before we go, we'll take the breaking news quickly again. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has tested negative for the COVID-19 virus, following a test for the disease that was carried out yesterday on the president by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC. Arise News can now authoritatively report. The NCDC has informed the president on the outcome, his negative result this morning in Abuja, bringing relief and excitement to the presidential villa. According to presidential sources, the test for the president became necessary after his chief of staff, Mr. Abba Kyari, tested positive for COVID-19 on Monday. Kyari had traveled to Germany on Saturday, March 7, to meet with officials of Siemens in Munich on the Nigerian electricity expansion program. He returned exactly 1 week later on Saturday, March 14, but did not show any symptoms. He was said to have been at a meeting on containing the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria all through Sunday, where he reportedly started to cough. Subsequently, he voluntarily submitted himself for testing and was informed of his status yesterday. He has, as of last night, gone into isolation and for treatment. We'll be staying with the story as more details unfold.